Faith can feel like hearts and butterflies until someone lights a match and burns it all to the ground. Welcome to the Burning Butterflies podcast.
The sad thing is that there's abuse of every kind within the church. But the spiritual abuse is the stuff that just
What's a place there shouldn't be abuse? Like, there just shouldn't be abuse in a place that claims Jesus.
Well, it ruins your soul. If you're new here, we suggest listening to our prologue episode first. This is the story of two women's journey through spiritual abuse and escaping from toxic church culture while finding hope in Christ.
Sometimes it's just the facts, and if you get offended by it, that's a you issue. And if we can't be mature enough to have these conversations, even if some of the topics are difficult, then shame on us.
All right, today we're building a building. So we mentioned in my Kool-Aid episode that we had built a building and moved into it. But that is seriously it's a whole episode all on its own.
Which is why we're here.
Yes. So rather than breaking that episode up into multiple parts, we thought that this would just be a good standalone explanation episode.
Yeah. And then for some context, so I moved to the state and moved to the town where Come As You Are is at a point where they didn't have a building.
Yes, we were in the high school.
Because I did not attend until after the building was built for a little while. Because when I moved here and I looked for churches, I had come from a non-denominational church, and that church has church plants all over. And so I looked for one of those churches out here, and I found a few of them. They were just like a 30-minute drive.
Yeah.
And I felt like it was really important to go to church. I wanted the whole small town, small community, live in my community, fairy tale story. I love it.
But that was very big at that point in time in the non-denominational movement, is you have to go to church.
Yeah, being
in your community.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And so I went online and I looked at the About Us pages of both of two of the churches that I had found. There's a lot of churches in our community, but two of them, one was listed as a non-denominational and the other was like a free version of whatever the denomination is.
Yeah, and these ones are all the rest of them are denominations.
Yes. Yeah. And so out of the two, I was leaning towards Come As You Are, based off of their About page. And then I noticed that they didn't have a building. And so in my upbringing and false belief systems that I grew up with, a church without a building, it was enough that I had already left the Lutheran church and was attending non-denominational. That was a big enough deal. Then to go to a church without a building, that's just would have been too far.
Yeah, no building. Womp womp.
Womp womp. So I ended up going to the other church that I had found.
Yeah.
But Amanda, you were full-fledged already in the time of the building.
Some of it, we have found this in timelining this podcast. When you spend 20 years, 10 years in your case, at a place, it's really easy to get dates mixed up because you
lump things together and you think things were 6 months. Turns out it was 3 years. Things that you thought were 3 years apart were 6 months apart.
Yeah. And so there was a little bit of that going on with putting together this timeline, but also a lot of this so when Come As You Are had their 20th anniversary, Tom did not want to have a celebration because he did not care. And other people were like, this is kind of big deal. Your church has been around for 20 years. Most church plants fail within the first 2 years, which, fun fact. So yeah, you've made it 20 years.
Yeah.
Let's celebrate this. And so he did not want to do anything. So we had to kind of talk him into it.
Yeah.
And I say that kind of tongue in cheek because there was no talking Tom into anything. It was a matter of how could you present an idea in a way that he would feel like it was his idea and that it was a good idea.
Yes. The song and dance.
Yes. And then you would do the behind the scenes, like talking to other people, because like we established in our Steps and Studies episode, he would call people and ask, like, what do you think of this idea? And so you would have to like,
on your side.
Yeah, you would have to front load people of like, this would be a great idea, right? This would be a great idea. So then the more people you talk to,
everybody's playing the game. Yeah.
Oh, 100%.
Oh, this is so funny. Go ahead.
So we talk him into doing a 20th anniversary celebration. Part of that is I love history. I am a huge like historian buff, like, and I thought it would be really cool to make a giant timeline on a big giant scroll of paper of the entire church history. So we added the big things on there, and then we put it out and invited people to add their own personal family history. Were you married in the church? Were you baptized in the church? Were you all these things, right? You add your personal family history onto the church family history. It'll be so beautiful. It'll be a whole picture of our church family, right? History. Yeah. Tom could not have cared less. Like, honestly, he thought the whole thing was stupid and he didn't understand why we needed to do it, but everyone was excited and on board. So I think he was just like, fine, whatever. As long as I don't have to do it, I don't care. So as I was making that timeline, I started asking questions about building the building, because there were some things that I couldn't remember exact dates and things like that. And I was given a tote, like not a file cabinet, like a tote. Seriously, any piece of paper, any receipt, anything that had to do with building the building was in the tote. Not organized in files, no, just thrown in there.
We have it all. It's in this tote.
So an entire tote filled to the top of paper.
Wow.
That it appears that at one point it was in a file cabinet and they just threw it all in the tote to make more room in the file cabinet, wrote with a Sharpie marker on their building, and shoved it in a closet.
There you go. Okay.
And so I was like, oh, okay.
This is my
all right,
now.
Here we go. So that's where I'm getting some of these dates from, is when I put all that together. When I left Come As You Are, I did a huge like purge and I threw away a bunch of stuff, and like I,
had some therapy.
Yeah, burn therapy. My fire pit in the backyard went for quite a few nights in a row.
That was a great summer.
But
so many s'mores.
Honestly, like, the fact that I found a notebook where I had some of these dates written down is kind of spectacular, because I thought I got rid of it.
It was gone in the purge.
And so, yeah. And then also the very first thing that I post, because I talked Tom into letting me start a Facebook page. I manipulated the situation in order to have Tom think it was a good idea that we have a Facebook page. The first posts were about building the building.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
Okay.
So in January 2008, the membership banquet. So if you remember back to one of my previous episodes, I talk about the infamous banquet where I'm pregnant and I'm throwing up in the bathroom.
Yeah.
This is the one before that.
Oh,
so right before that, the year before, the church had talked as long as I could remember about collecting money, saving money. From my understanding is it was like day one. One day we will have our own building. We don't want to have to rent the high school. And it was a pain in the butt. Like, you couldn't get in there till Sunday morning. So, people were having to show up at like 6, 7 a.m., set up for church. Heaven forbid it was a Sunday where we had baptism. So like, I was baptized in a horse tank on the stage in the high school auditorium.
Wow. Yeah. And setting up and tearing down every day, not having your own space.
Like children's classrooms functioned. They had totes on wheels that they just rolled in. The church had a big giant like trailer that they stored stuff in. Like, it was just a pain in the butt for everyone. Right. So like, having their own building was a big deal. So they had collected money as long as I could remember. We couldn't take out loans because that was like a big no-no. Yeah, our church is not going to be
debt free.
Yeah. Even though like
most people are
Tom
in debt, especially anymore.
Tom personally had a mortgage, but
Well, that's the caveat, though. You have to be debt free, except your mortgage is okay. The goal is to not have a mortgage, but it's okay to have one in this debt free concept. That's presented at the church.
So anyway, financial peace was really big at the church for
peace,
all of those. But so we couldn't take out a loan to pay for our building. So we found an organization that allows you to sell bonds. So essentially we were kind of sort of taking out a loan. So like people would buy bonds. So we would have that money automatically. But then once those bonds matured, and I think they were in like 10 and 20 year increments. So once those bonds matured, then the church had to pay out. Yes. So they had time to be able to pay that back. And there was this organization did it. So it was a whole thing. They put together a presentation, explained all the bonds and all of that at this banquet. Then, so this is the very beginning. This is how we start the banquet. Then on a piece of paper, you're supposed to write yes or no. Yes, we are moving forward in building the building. No, we are not ready to build our own building yet. We all write on those little pieces of paper. I personally voted no because I did not think our church was at a place
to be able to make that
where we could sustain that type of commitment. And so we all wrote our stuff on a piece of paper. They collected the pieces of paper. Then Charlotte took them in another room and counted the votes. So while all of us are listening to the presentations by all the ministries, Charlotte, to my knowledge, was alone in another room with the votes, counting them.
Okay.
Seems very diplomatic, right?
Yeah, I was thinking, because a couple episodes ago, we talked about how this was like a dictatorship, like it was Tom and then everybody else. And there was no leadership structure for the longest time and no checks and balance systems.
Yeah.
So I was sitting here going, wow, that's so diplomatic, but I have a feeling.
So it came out and it was it was basically unanimous that yes, it was almost unanimous. Huh. So I felt like, I must be the only naysayer. I'm so negative. I'm such a downer. All of the narratives, right? You know?
Right.
Oh, I did not have faith in her.
You're the only one who voted no.
I'm the only one who voted no. Oh my goodness. What am I going to do with myself? So, but as we're going through this process, I started talking to other people and they're like, I voted no too. Well, really?
So everybody else is I guess I'm the only one who voted no.
We all thought we were the only ones who voted no. And there was a significant group.
Right. And so enough to lead you to believe that it was not unanimous.
And the hilarious thing is,
and which is totally part of the narrative.
It was a large majority of the people who voted no are the people who actually did the work to build the building.
Wow.
So we decide we are going to move forward.
Yeah. Moving forward. Yeah. Full steam ahead. Building the building.
So Tom starts looking for property. And Tom has a very still to this day, Tom has a very boomer mentality when it comes to how what things should cost
versus the reality of what
and the reality of things. Cost, and so what do you mean this costs this? So I think he anticipated us getting this big giant piece of property for what we could afford. And and we can't do that. And so there was 2 properties we could afford. One of them, if we had bought that, there was a giant flood that came through in the year 2013.
Yeah.
If we had bought and built on that property, the church would have been underwater.
Flooded, yeah.
And then the other one was out in this industrial area near the interstate.
Right.
And so it was all these industrial engineering buildings.
It's a different town. It's where these 2 towns intersect.
Yeah. And so it's really weird. So
which would have been a very bizarre place to put a church.
Yes, it would. Even now,
even now.
Even though that whole, it's been developed and there's more stuff out there. There's a liquor store out there now. I think that's funny. We could have been next door to the liquor store. So Tom starts, he realizes we can't just buy property, right? So he starts looking at property that is people are struggling, it's going to be seized by the bank or foreclosed on and stuff like that. So back when my husband and I were in college, so in between the time where we attended youth group, but then we came as adults, In that in-between time, the church had actually purchased a house across the street from the high school.
Okay.
And so because I wasn't there, but from overhearing conversations, I think that's how the church got that property.
Right.
Was it was going to be foreclosed on and the church intervened.
Mm-hmm.
So Tom starts looking at properties like that, and he finds this little farm, and it's kind of in the middle of town. So like when I started dating Justin, once you got off the interstate, you had to drive like, I think like 5 miles into town before you got like to town.
Right. Like, yeah, it's like 6 miles, but it was nothing but farmland.
Yeah, it's farmlands and little farmhouses. By the time we have this, like, there's on this side of the highway coming into town, it's all subdivisions, and then there's this one little farm. So like they've sold off all the farmland around it. So when I say a little farm, we're talking just a couple acres where like there was a barn, a silo, and the little farmhouse, right? And some corrals. These people had 2 mortgages on it. It was posted in the paper. It was going to get seized. They were going to default on both mortgages. So Tom calls them personally, like just calls up the people. It's like, hey, we want to buy your 2 mortgages. We want to save you from having to go through a foreclosure. I don't know exactly what happened. But the narrative moving forward was definitely like, we saved them from having to go through a foreclosure, and they weren't even grateful for it.
Interesting.
Like, so I don't know,
they
because
great. Like,
that's Tom would say that.
That's what he would say. But
yeah.
Like, did you?
Like we never met the people.
Okay.
Like,
mind.
no, like we never met the people. Like they didn't come to church. I mean, it was really bizarre.
Yeah.
So.
But on point. So yeah.
Oh yeah, no, very on brand for Tom.
Thank you, on brand.
Yes. We buy out their mortgages. So basically we get the land for what they owed on their mortgages. So the way Tom presents it is, praise God, we're getting this land for cheap, but then also we are saving these people. So we tear down the corrals, we tear down the barn and the silo, and we keep the little farmhouse. So Come As You Are had an office in like a little building, like a part of kind of like the downtown area. Mm-hmm. It's now like a little restaurant. So we let go of that. And the plan was that this little farmhouse, we were going to use that as a temporary office until we got the building built. And then there would be offices in the building. And then once that was done, we were going to give away this house to someone. And all they had to pay was whatever the fees were. Movers. Yeah. Like, you know how like, you see it. Yeah. They jack it up, put a trailer on it and drive it somewhere.
And you too.
Yes.
Have this house on your land.
Yes. All you got to do is you just got to pay for it. What Tom did not take into account is the fact that it is a brick home.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, not so movable.
Not so movable. I guess there's ways to do it, but it would have been like astronomically expensive, like to the point where people could have just like bought a brand new house.
Yeah.
And so it became very obvious that like no one is going to pay you
for this house.
For this, like no one's doing that.
Yeah, it's not happening. So we reconvene.
Yeah. So the plan changes. Mm-hmm. We already have blueprints.
Yeah, with offices in the church building.
So here's the wild thing. Like the church I'm currently attending, they're in the process of building a building.
Yeah.
Like everything from start to finish is so transparent. Like so transparent at this church. Like the pastor gives weekly updates on where we are with things. He's posting things on social media about like, hey, we signed off on this. Hey, pray, we're meeting with this person today. Like they got bids. They spent probably a full year just designing the building and working with
people to understand
working with architects. Yes. And asking people questions and, all of this stuff, like pouring so much into trying to make this, the churches, like this was like, we're building a building. Perfect. Tom's got blueprints. We're moving forward. Like, crazy. I'm sure there was more to that, but like, that's really how it felt just sitting in the pews.
Right.
And like, I'm volunteering in the office, but like, that's really how it felt.
But still knowing the process, the rest of the process. As you tell the rest of the story, that'll make sense. Like why? Because that's how everything got done. Like I know I wasn't here for the building, but every other thing that I've seen done through Come As You Are, that's how it's been. We're doing this, bam, Tom's got it, it's done. Bam, Tom's got it, bam, Tom's got it. And then you just do whatever Tom would tell you to do.
Yeah. So, like, in hindsight and knowing Tom, and this is just my own personal wonderment, did Tom have blueprints of a building and he was just trying to find the perfect land to put it on?
Right. I don't know. Yeah.
Like, that's my own curiosity.
Well, because like you're going to talk about how the building got built, but it got built from people in the church.
Oh, yeah.
So, I mean, I'm thinking like just in my experience at the church that if I was attending at that time, the way I would imagine it would go is he would collaborate with somebody who did that in the church.
Yeah.
I mean, especially if like you were in the church office and there was no like call to some architecture company.
Yeah.
Like,
I don't know how any of that happened. It felt very much like we're building a building. Perfect. Here's our blueprints.
So was this like, cause you know how you can go online and you can
buy blueprints. I wonder if that's what he did. Like, I don't know. It was super weird. And
I just think of other building processes that I've been a part of, not in churches, but in any building, like the architect team and like they're signed off on.
Well, I mean, working at the school, like they're working on like building school. Like, I mean, they came in and they were like, all right, here we go. This is what your department's going to look like in the new school. And here's your cabinets and, I mean, like renderings of classrooms and
this was just a blueprint.
And this is like, here's our blueprint.
Here's a blueprint. Okay.
And like at the church I'm attending now, they have a big sign in the lobby. Like, this is what we're working towards. Like all of this, like, we really didn't have that at Come As You Are.
Yeah.
And so we broke ground in 2009. I'm wanting to say it was I think it was like the fall of 2009, or it might have been like early spring. All of the pictures that we have of that, everyone's wearing like jackets and sweaters, but it was enough to where like we could break ground. It's not like it was in the middle of winter. Yeah. And stuff like that. And the only gauge I have of like when this was Clay sat in the dirt with his little toy shovel and I had to don't eat the dirt as we're breaking ground, Yeah. And so they kind of had it marked off. And it's so funny because like now looking at like where things are, they were like, this is our children's wing. And all the kids like stood around and broke ground there. Like, that's not where the classrooms were. Like where we stood. I'm like that, like,
no, you're like, now that I know where everything ended up, that's not where it was when we started.
That's weird. The kids broke ground in the cafe area, but okay, like whatever.
Right.
So they break ground and it's built by people in the church. So it's all men except for one lady, but she was a little rough and tumble. She had lived a life and she was married to a guy who was like, he did like contracting, like construction work. And so it made sense that she would come and serve with her husband. All of this is volunteer. We are not paying anyone. There's a guy in the church who he was a contractor. So the entire building was built under his contracting license. I don't know if he got paid. I know him and Tom did not see eye to eye. And this guy, through this whole process, I got to know him and his wife super well. And we stayed friends with them. And like, he's since passed on. Wonderful, wonderful people. But when the building was built, they dipped. They were gone. Because him and Tom...
I didn't see it.
And I honestly, I don't know if he was paid or if that was considered like, this is your ministry. Yeah. Because everyone who built that building, it was their minute, like you're serving God. Like, and so there's guys who are working construction jobs during the day and coming at night. There's guys who work jobs all week long and are coming. Yeah. And so they're there from sunup to sundown, Monday through Saturday. Right. So Sunday was a day of rest. So everyone's building the building. And then the women, because like we are an active part of this also, but we need to know our place. And that place is in the kitchen. And so we feed the men. So we would feed them dinner during the week. And then on Saturday, there was a lunch team and a dinner team. Mm-hmm. So my night was Tuesdays. And I got to know this lady. I could not tell you if she attended the church or not. Like my only context for this woman, only time I ever met her, talked to her, anything, was when we cooked meals for the men on Tuesday nights.
How strange.
And I mean, granted, I was in youth at this time, so I mean, very much like I was.
You're like, I don't know if I ever saw this lady before or after, but I could
Yes,
dinner with her.
Yeah,
That's awesome.
And so our nights were Tuesday nights, and so what we do is you call, in the afternoon, you call the office, say, hey, how many guys? They would go out to the job, right behind the little farmhouse, out to the little job site, and they'd be like, how many people for dinner? And then they come back in, they call you back and be like, okay, you're going to have like 10 guys or whatever.
Yeah.
So then we cook meals. I actually really enjoyed this.
Yeah.
I had fun. It took me back to my days of like when I was a little kid and we would do harvesting.
Yeah.
And like we'd have to cook meals for the harvest crew and stuff like that. Like I had fun. And me and this gal, like we had a blast together. Like we're still friends. She's moved out of state, but like her and I are still friends on Facebook and talk and stuff. And so like we had fun. And like there was this one guy and he was such a baby about eating food. And his whole thing was he did not eat anything green ever.
Interesting.
And so it became our goal, like how much green stuff can we sneak in and make him eat without him knowing? And like that became a goal. Like, and how blatant can we get?
That's funny.
And so we got super creative with what we were cooking because how can I put something green in here?
Yeah.
And like it started off with like we're going to hide stuff in the tomato sauce.
Right.
But then it was like,
that's like entry level.
Can I put something green in Alfredo sauce and I don't know this? Like
how
what can I do?
Yes. That's hilarious.
Yeah. And we're not talking like iceberg lettuce green. We're talking like jalapenos, bell pepper green.
Right.
Like
oh no, that's
it was super fun. Like that was like my best memory of that
that's
is like making him eat green stuff and he didn't know. And so we get this building to the point where we have the studs are up and we're starting the drywall process. So we bring the youth in because the older male leader that him and I were doing youth together, this is before he left the church, he was helping build the building. So he worked as an air traffic controller and he would actually work, a few days on and a few days off. So like when he was off, he was at the building. And just to give you an idea, like, I mean, we have people who are coming and doing community service there, like, oh, you need to do, like we had one guy who got a DUI and he needed to do a bunch of community service. So like he came and helped build the building.
Do you think, because come as you are, when I got there and up until we left, it was a very big place that you could do community service. Like it was registered,
like through the county
it was a legal way for you to come and get your community service and you could legally sign off on your thing. Did they do that before, or do you think that was like the start of it?
That's interesting. I don't know, because I don't remember anyone doing community service before that.
Yeah. Interesting. I just wondered, just because you mentioned that.
No,
like,
that would definitely seem like and that would definitely seem like very, again, on brand for Tom of like, oh, we need this. Like, yep, okay, we'll figure that out. I mean, we have some people who have construction experience, but like there are some people who
it's a whole mix. You've got guys that like work as masons who then have a crew on the church building that maybe aren't masons, but they can definitely be shown how to do something.
Yeah, exactly.
You've got a lot of professional people, but you also got a lot of non-professional people.
Yeah. And so like to the point where the older youth leader guy, when he was working there, one time he went up in the scissor lift and was doing stuff up in like the rafters of the sanctuary in the scissor lift. And everyone left the job site for the night and unplugged the scissor lift and he was left up there. And I guess he had like headphones or something on and like was just kind of like up there, like just working music, jamming out. Yeah. And
he got left there.
He got left there and they unplugged it and he didn't know because he didn't know how he didn't have a construction background.
Didn't know that there's an emergency release on
it. He was stuck up there. And so like he had to like call people. And so finally like the person he got a hold of was me. Because he had called like 3 or 4 people and no one was answering the phone. So finally he called me and got a hold of me. And me and my husband had to go down there and like help him get down.
Oh my gosh.
Like,
oh no, I know.
Yeah.
Poor guy.
And so,
oh my God. I mean, up in those scissor lifts, and I'm like, that's just horrible.
Yeah.
Horrible.
So, because he was a part of it, we bring the youth in, and like it's kind of cool. Like they took the kids up in the scissor lift. Like I was like the total mom who was down. Like I'm like panicked, and I was like, we're only taking one up at a time. Don't mess around. You're not going to shake it. Like
stop moving.
Because we go like they went clear up into like the rafters of the gym, and they let the kids sign their names on the rafters of the gym, and yeah. So by May of 2010. We have this thing built out enough to where we're ready to drywall on the inside. Okay. And so they bring the whole church in, and we all come in and with Sharpies, and everyone gets to like write verses and their names and all of this stuff. Froggy, I believe this was the point in time where Froggy may have gotten into some trouble.
Well, it is not this time that Froggy
and so Froggy spent,
let's be real.
I mean, he sat there for probably a week straight. He wrote the entire book of John, inside one of the, yeah. So inside, the large classroom, in between the windows on the, on this, on the drywall is the whole book of John. Yep. Is the whole, he wrote the entire book of John, on the cinder block wall. Yeah, with a Sharpie.
Somebody was really trying to be good.
Yeah, I don't know what he did. But
I don't know. He did something.
Yep. So he wrote the whole, and everyone praised him for it. Like, oh, it's so good. Now, like in hindsight, you're like, oh, he totally was in trouble. And he needed a project. So we were going to have Froggy write the entire.
He did a lot of work on that building.
Oh, yeah. No, he did. Yeah.
Because he needed a project.
Something to do. Yeah. So.
And you know how I know, like, I'm not being crass. Yeah. Is because he never told me.
Oh, because if he had done it out of the kindness of his heart, because if it was being moved by the Lord.
Yeah, so there has to be another story to it because it wasn't something he ever bragged about.
Yep, makes sense. So we get this thing built. Okay, it is time to start thinking about painting and all of that. This was a whole big issue because at the high school, we had a decor team that it was pretty much like old ladies with their fake plants and their fake flowers that, like, you know, every month we would design new flower arrangements and stuff for the stage to decorate the stage to make it look more. I mean, they did a good job. I'm not knocking these women. They really did a good job of like trying to make it not look like we were on a high school theater stage. Like they were trying to make it seem homey, but it was.
You just unlocked.
Were you on that team? Oh no, you couldn't have been. You weren't there.
I didn't go to the church, but you know where I did work and volunteer and participate in? High school theater.
Oh yeah.
And I remember all this. Like you just were talking, and I'm like, oh my goodness, because we had to work around every time there was a play. Like we had to work around. Like, okay, well that's the church's stuff, or the church would come in and put their stuff up, and then if something got let, or like there was always, because yes, the church was burdened with having to set up and tear down,
but the school
was
also
operating high school theater and community theater in the same space that the church is having church on Sunday.
Mm-hmm.
And so we would build sets, you know, and we would have things. It'd be showtime, and you guys would still be having church there.
Yeah.
Whoa, that just opened up like, oh my goodness. Okay, go ahead. Sorry, keep going.
Yeah. So these women were super excited to be a part of this decor team. And through this whole process, you had teams you could sign up to be on. And they had like running lists of who's on these teams, right? So these women wanted to be on the decor team. It came down to this one woman was the head of the decor team. This is the woman in my Kool-Aid episode that her husband would later be licensed as a pastor. She took over 3Gs. She took over, the Bible study, all of it. It was this woman. We painted that entire church building the exact same colors as inside her house.
Yeah. I knew that because I went to her house once.
Yeah, you walked into her house and you had like the Thomas Kincaid style paintings with the gold frames and the maroon and the deep greens and the tans and
it was what was popular at the time.
Oh yeah,
like,
in the 90s.
Yeah.
But this is 2011. Like that, even that, that was very outdated even then. Like it was a whole thing. So then it was decided, well, all of the fake plants and all of their flower arrangements that they had been using all these years, we were going to find that's how we were going to decorate the church.
We had all the stuff we'd use it.
Yeah. But they did not get to pick out, they thought they were going to get to pick out, counters and fixtures and flooring and all of that by being on the design team. And really all they got to do was like put their fake plants in the corner of the lobby.
Right.
So that caused a lot of hurt and division. So December of 2010, our lease is up at the high school.
Yeah.
We have most of the building finished except for the sanctuary. The sanctuary is not done. And so we kind of had to decide, are we going to keep and you had to sign a year lease. I think the school district has like redone their leasing since then, but like at the time it was like you signed a full year for this. So it was either we were going to have to re-sign our lease or let it go.
Yeah.
So it was decided that we were going to move in and we were going to, because the gym was done. And so it's like there's classrooms surrounding the gym. And the doors to the classrooms go into to get into the classroom, you have to go through the gym. Yeah. And so it was decided that we're going to move everything into there. Everything else is blocked off by caution tape because it's not signed off. We don't have occupancy and all of that. So all of that is blocked off and everything for the sanctuary and like that, the whole other side of the building. Mm-hmm. But on the side where we had like bathrooms and the gym and classrooms and a little kitchen. So we had like the little stage that they would set up in the park for like the summer, summer event, the big summer event that they have in the park. They set that up. We had all the chairs and we set everything up in the gym and then the surrounding, that's where kids did classes. Tom was so preoccupied in his stuff, where his stuff was going to go. No one thought to plan out where stuff was going to be.
Right.
So
we have a building, we have empty classrooms.
Figure it out.
Nobody has any idea where anybody's being assigned to.
So we had on the gym side, you had all these classrooms, but then we had 2 classrooms on the other side because remember, we were supposed to have offices. We ended up keeping the house as the office.
So we didn't need offices.
So there was going to be 3 offices back there with a little reception desk in front.
That makes so much sense now. So why that's there.
And so there was going to be 2 offices, and then the middle office wasn't going to be a bathroom. Mm-hmm. It was going to have an opening to like the reception area. And that's where like the copy machine and all of that. But then when we didn't need the offices, they turned those into like the nursery and the preschool classrooms with a Jack and Jill bathroom in the middle.
Right. Yeah. That makes so much sense now.
Yes. And so Tom was part of the Good Old Boys Club with the city planner that was there at the time. And so pretty much anything Tom wanted, he would call and this guy would be like, yep, do whatever. Yep, do whatever. I'll sign off on whatever. I've looked at your plans. I'll sign off on whatever. So there were things that were done that looking at it after the fact, you were like, well, that's weird. One of those things is the front steps. And that will come into play in later chapters of our story. But the front steps were made in a way so it wasn't like you were stepping up a step. It was almost like half a curb height. And like people would trip on them or miss the steps and stuff like that. That will come into play later, but that was one of the things that should have been something that the city planner
came out and looked at. a little bit better.
Yeah, that it was like, what are we doing? Why are we doing that?
Right.
And there was a lot of things that came up after the fact of like, why do we not have lights in the parking lot?
Right.
So like it was
There's
weird.
A lot of things that you're like, this should have been on somebody's checklist.
Yeah,
somewhere.
like that. That's weird, and it should like, yeah.
Yeah, and I came to the church, 4 months after, you guys had your first service in the gym, so a lot of these things had happened or were happening or like were being swept under the rug at the time.
Okay, the sanctuary signed off on, we can fully move in. The lady who ran the nursery threw a fit. Like, she was so mad. You're not going to stick me down on that other end all by myself in the corner, shove me in the corner, blah, blah, blah. Well, like, it made more sense for the nursery to be closer to the sanctuary, the babies, the itty bitties, like down there. It made more sense. Right. And she was not happy about it whatsoever. They even, like, they really tried hard. They brought in all of, like, the tiles in that Jack and Jill bathroom. Yeah. They brought them in, and all the kids in children's ministry put their handprints, up on the
going
the
there,
little tiles.
It makes total sense. Like, not knowing ever it was supposed to be anything else, or nobody knew that's what it was supposed to be. I mean, they built it with the smaller toilet, right?
Oh yeah, like they it was a decision made after they decided they were keeping the house as an office.
Yeah. And it makes total sense. Like the way that, like, with the sanctuary, if parents had to come out because their kid was crying, or if a kid was crying to be able to take
it's
them out
right
of the
down
classroom,
there.
It's the perfect location.
Yeah. So that lady threw a fit. So that was the start of arguments of where people's classrooms were going to be. When we originally moved in and we were having to have service in the gym, the youth, it was something like, oh, we're moving in and we're doing this like in 2 Sundays from now. Yeah. Like very on the fly. So everyone was just like, okay, we'll go here. And it was mostly done of like, what makes the most sense? Yeah. And so of like keeping in mind that we're going to have all the adults in worship and all of that.
And the service in
the middle of everything. And so it made more sense to put the youth kids to where they kind of had to walk behind the stage in like a corner classroom because they were the oldest. They would stay out of the cords. They wouldn't try to go under the stage. Like, it made more sense. Like, let's put the biggest ones there and the littlest at the opposite end. And so, when it came time to like, we were going to have permanent rooms as youth leaders, we were told this is where your room's going to be. We're like, perfect. Great. So the week where we're signed off, everyone can move into their permanent rooms. We go start moving stuff in and hanging stuff up on the wall. And this lady from children's comes in and she's like, what are you doing? And we're like, we're setting up the youth room. Like, we're so excited, right? She was pissed because she was like, well, I called dibs on this room. And we're like, from who? And so
I called dibs.
Like, the lady who was running children's ministry was like, yeah, you can have whatever room you want. Right. And no one ever thought that maybe youth and children's and like adult service and the refreshment team, everyone should probably get together and come up with a plan of like, how are we all going to fit in this building and work cohesively and what makes the most sense?
Like, we should have a small group of people who have,
sit down and have conversations.
And sit down and have a mature conversation without tons of input and make the decision for
So
people.
when I think I asked Charlotte, I can't even remember who I asked, but I asked someone like that where the youth would be when we were done. She pointed to the room and said, there. Yeah. So I thought that was what was earmarked.
Is this a room?
Yeah. Like in the church I'm attending now, they have the rooms labeled. Yeah, so if you go look on the floor plans on the big thing in the lobby, it says like, this is where this room's going to be, like all of this stuff. Right. So I assumed that was somewhere. Yeah. It wasn't. Like, people lost their damn minds over what room they were going to be in.
Dibs.
Yeah.
Hello. That's like biblical. I call dibs on it.
Like, it was so many people got so mad, and so many people,
I believe it.
like, through this whole process, building the building, moving in, all
Yeah.
of this, everyone was so upset.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
That-
people's feelings got hurt, toes got stepped
Oh,
on.
yeah.
All of it. Yeah.
People
I can see it.
left
I believe it.
over this whole thing.
I believe
That
it.
was the beginning of our sifting seasons.
Oh goodness gracious! We had a building sifting season.
Like, and that's when people really started, like, we're in a sifting
Wow.
season.
Yeah. Wow.
That's when people really
That's
started.
when that lingo came up.
Mm-hmm.
They couldn't make, and before I interject a false narrative because of what I assume, like, were things said about the people who left during that time?
Oh,
If
yeah,
there was a
because
sifting?
you don't get your way and you assume that the building is yours and God gave us this building for the community. And this whole community has been watching for, this year and a half that we've been building this building. They watch and they've been waiting and they've been anticipating us opening. And I have people in the community who drive by and call all the time and want to know when we're opening and all of this stuff.
I know that I don't represent a vast majority, but like, I lived in the community at this time. And I actually drove to church every Sunday past this church. And I gotta tell you, nowhere in my mind is there, like, I don't really remember it being a farm. Like, there's nothing that stood out about it as a farm.
Mm-hmm.
Like, even though I bought a house like right behind it, but it was already a church when I bought my house. But my house had been there for many years. So I mean,
Mm-hmm.
But I remember the neighborhoods, but I don't really remember anything about this particular farm. I don't remember watching a building being constructed. Like, that's nowhere in my mind. Like, it didn't resonate in my world at all.
Yeah.
And I drove past this
Well,
building site once a week.
when you're a narcissist and you think the world revolves around you, the whole community was waiting for this. And so when
crazy.
when you think you have control over this building and you think you can decide what is done,
Right. And when it doesn't go your way, then you have to leave.
then you
So that's
leave.
the
And so it was,
Interesting.
that was very much the narrative. When really in reality, like, now looking back, I'm like, how many people were calling out crap?
Yeah.
How many people were calling out the double standards? How come one person can decide what color we're going to paint the walls and all of that, and they have control over everything, and these other people who just, like, were happy to serve and wanted to have a part of it, they get to put fake plants in the corner.
Yeah.
And so...
Well, because that's how it was every time. I mean, from this point forward that I was at the church, if you left, you were shamed or wrong, or there was something wrong with you. You were victim shamed.
Mm-hmm.
So...
Yep. And so, the lady who did the nursery starting out, she did not have to go in that corner to the classroom that was created to be a nursery. She didn't have to go there. She got to have that's why there was one classroom around the gym that had a Dutch door, because she got her way. And so the kids because that originally was supposed to be the preschool room where you have multiple kids potty training, are closest to the bathrooms with multiple stalls.
Yeah.
Nope,
It's because of one
she
person
threw
who
a fit.
So then we had to make a classroom on the big kids' side.
So why do some people get to throw a fit but other people don't? Yeah. Our first service in the sanctuary was Easter of 2011. So that's when we were
in the sanctuary.
In
December
the
was
sanctuary.
In the gym.
So we moved in,
And
like, I think it was like, if I remember right, we did Christmas Eve service at the high school that year. And then the following Sunday we were in the building.
Yeah.
In the gym.
Yeah, I have to look up what day Easter
And then
was.
by Easter, I don't remember when it was, like March or April, whenever it was. I just remember it was a big deal, like Easter.
I must have come before Easter. I didn't realize that was the first. That's interesting because I came in April, but I don't know if I came after Easter or before Easter. Yeah, interesting.
So that was kind of like but again, we painted with this brush and it was so beautiful, and I fed that Kool-Aid to so many people. Like, it was wonderful. Like, we did this. We built this with our own hands. It was so amazing. Our men did this. And, all of this stuff. And like, yes, it was amazing. It was great, but at what cost?
Yeah.
How many relationships were ruined? How many people were hurt in the process of building a building that is supposed to be for God and for his people? How many people were so hurt they had to walk away?
I mean, like that, honestly, we're talking about a building. That's the question I have about the whole process.
about the whole thing.
How, like, as Christians and as church organization attending Christians, how many people have to be hurt?
Mm-hmm.
And how many people are we going to continue to victim shame because they were hurt?
Yeah.
And not take responsibility as the people who are supposed to be healthy, well-adjusted, Christ-following, got it figured out people. If that's who we really are, how come so many people are being hurt in the wake
Yep.
of Christian organization?
Yeah.
And we're just talking about a building.
Burning Butterflies is a listener-supported podcast. Today's episode is brought to you by our amazing supporters on Patreon.
Follow the link in our show notes to learn how you can become a Patreon supporter too. Supporters get exclusive access to bonus content each month, including outtakes, cut content, and supporter-only episodes. If you've enjoyed this episode, please leave us a rating on your listening platform.
Burning Butterflies is a production of Asha Media. Thank you for listening.